My name is Jeff Irving, and this is the Vrahode Tavern Podcast. I'm the creator of the Vrahode game system, and in this podcast, we're going to do a deep dive into the lore and gameplay of Vrahode. I'm joined by Brandon Rollins, who will be acting as your stand-in, asking many of the questions you might be curious about yourself. Brandon, what's the topic for today?
For today's topic, what I'm thinking of is actually this new trailer that by the time this episode is out, you will have dropped. The big one with David Diaz. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Of course, David did our teaser trailer. When did that come out, Brandon? That was back in, I want to say, January?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right. So we kind of contracted with David to do a couple videos for us, and most game companies don't do teaser trailers and then a full trailer. They just do a trailer. And I felt like because we're a small studio and we needed more publicity and more stuff out there. So the teaser trailer was well received, and I loved it. I thought it was well done. I thought it was a good start to showing off, of course, at that point, mostly art assets, but some gaming components. I loved the voiceover. We're not going to be doing the voiceover on this full trailer, but this one's going to show definitely more game assets, and it's going to show a little bit more about the Harbinger system and its capabilities. I recently was playing around with the Harbinger, just building some 5-level deep dungeons just so that I could make last minute tweaks to it, move miniatures around on it and see what I thought. And then I sent those off to David and he rendered them. So what I built, he's turned into a model for that full trailer. So you should really be able to see, the full capabilities of what you can make with it. And then also what, through the quests and the campaign, you're going to get the opportunity to build some of those for story in those play modes. So I think it's just going to be really cool.
It's really crazy to me to think about that initial teaser trailer that was dropped many, many months ago. And the fact that you couldn't really show off Harbinger, you couldn't really show off a lot of the things in the game. And it's like you said, you really just had to rely on art assets. And now you're getting to the point where, and people, you can see this, like the link is in the description right now. You can watch it right now. You can finally actually see what this game is going to look like on the table. And that's a huge difference from the initial trailer.
Yeah, we're definitely closer. And we're using newer assets too. We're using actual like production version of cards and stuff. So it's starting to look a little more polished, which is great. But to me, I went out there, I wanted really good music for this new trailer. I listened to a lot of music and I just couldn't quite put my finger on the tone that I wanted to strike with this video. I wanted it to be really dark and compelling and to kind of show that even though Vrahode is this beautiful kind of Greenwood tale with all of, it's a world that you want to care about, you want to fight for. But in this trailer, I wanted to get down into the kind of the dark depths of Vrahode. And my daughter, Olivia, she listens to a lot of cool music and she loves Lord of the Rings and stuff. And she and I both love the kind of chanting song that the dwarves do when they're visiting Bilbo's house in Hobbiton. And I thought, man, it would be so cool to get something like that, that's kind of has that dark kind of baritone vibrato to it. And Liv listens to a guy that out of California, he and a couple of his friends record this music that sounds very similar to the dwarves singing in The Hobbit. And I don't want to give anything away right now, but she found me a song and I reached out to the artist, and he was young enough and, not so famous that the price was unreasonable. So we licensed a song for the trailer that I really think is going to, I hope anyway, is going to blow some people's doors off, because it's dark, it's compelling, it fits perfectly with the way the story progresses in Vrahode, and the way you go underground and you're kicking around in these deep multi-level dungeons to try to discover, what's wrong with this world and how do we fix it. And so, It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be really cool.
How do you even find something like that? It's like, do you just go on Bandcamp and just start looking for folks, or like SoundCloud or something like that?
I mean, for me, it was more about just, thinking about, kind of the flavor and the tone. And like, for me, I mean, I kind of wanted to strike kind of a Bauhaus type tone. Bauhaus is, of course, Peter Murphy and Love and Rockets put together. They're, famous, big time goth rock band, been around a long time. But there's a song that they have, called Hollow Hills, that I really, really love, that I think would have been an exceptional song to do for the trailer. But of course, you can't afford to license a song by Bauhaus. Obviously, it's just too
Yeah.
expensive. And so my mind just kind of was in that area, that just gloomy darkness, that, and this song that Liv found for me. I mean, I really feel like we got lucky. We kind of got lucky in finding, being able to reach out to the artist, the price being reasonable, to license the song. And it literally just being the perfect song for the trailer.
You
Just,
gotta love it when stuff comes together like that.
oh, I so want to talk about more, but I can't. I don't want to spoil it. I've done so good for this long. I'm not going to screw it up now.
That's all right. And anybody, again, if you're listening, like, this thing is already out. You can click the link in the description. It'll actually show you more than we can say here. But yeah, speaking of things just kind of snapping together, you did some playtesting just this weekend, right? Over the Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah, I think it's, to be quite honest, the group we have, this is the second time we've play tested with this group. We added one more person, but we've got, we really, at this point in the game, we need people that are willing to be critical, people that are willing to really look objectively. It takes gamers to do that. It takes people that have played games that are heavier than ours, games that are lighter, but where they have a genuine love of dungeon crawls. They have a genuine love of fantasy. They have a genuine love of adventure games. And so we had Jess and Joe, and then they brought their friend Justin over, who's also he's not an uber gamer, but he understands games well, and he's very bright. And so he weighed in and helped us with some really cool last minute tweaks. I mean, the overland modes in the game, when you're going from region to region, those have been working for a long time, and they've been fun, and people have been responding very positively to that kind of play. But it was the Underlands that really needed to be perfect, and I mean perfect. And it may not seem like that big a deal or that hard to pull that off, but with the way we want the game to play, and the fact that we have so many scaling mechanisms built into the game, it required a great deal of detailed thought, and more than you would think. And it had to do with, like, when you enter a dungeon, or the Underlands in a general sense, which includes dungeons from 1 level up to 5 and caves, basically anything underground. How do you enter that? How do you handle movement for a group of heroes within that when they're not in battle? And then how do you, through the scaling mechanisms in place, introduce content to the party in a way that's exciting? It plays fast, but it also doesn't just put the onus on one of the heroes. It lets everybody in the party have some fun. And so it's like, it's this place, the Underlands is darker than night in the Overlands, because we have 2 moons. And so the only time that heroes experience true darkness is when they're in the Underlands. And so they're just not used to it. Their eyes aren't accustomed to it. And so it's thick darkness. And so it's like you have to walk up to a threshold to be able to roll the door die. We have this custom die. You roll the door die, and that kind of lets you resolve what's happening in that threshold. And then, but in order to effectively draw all the cards in the spaces beyond those thresholds, you have to keep, the doors can't become these choke points where it slows the game down. And so we had we had to sequence the events within that just right. And they helped me do that. We finally got that action of moving around when you're not in battle, getting to thresholds, resolving the doorways, and then getting into the spaces beyond, and having that really play fluidly, feel right, but still have a lot of risk to it. We did it. We finally did it, and it feels just right. And then we also got to do Wandering Monsters this time, which is they were on a small cavern flat encounter map. I think it was 4B. Yeah, it comes in the core box. So we had a little cavern map that we were doing to test out the Underland mechanics. And in just that little one hall, 5-room cavern complex, we were able to generate enough noise tokens to create a wandering monster. And the way that works is, when you're in battle, when you go into battle with enemies, you generate a noise token. When you trigger a trap, you generate a noise token. When you bash a door, the door is locked and you have no key and you have to get into a room, it generates a noise token. If you're in a room and you've locked the door so that you can try to rest safely, well, if enemies are coming, they will bash that door and generate a noise token. So you get 5 noise tokens and a wandering monster is generated in the dungeon. And so we got to experience that, and it felt really good in the amount of time it took for one of those to be generated, because we were basically kind of wrapping up the dungeon, the cavern area. There was only 5 rooms, but right as we were wrapping it up, we generated that wandering monster. And so at the end, it was almost a race. Could we get out before it got to us? And it was just really cool. It worked out perfect.
Yeah, that is cool. That kind of automatically puts a limit on how long you should spend there without actually having to pay some kind of price for being there, essentially getting stuck in a big battle.
It is. It's almost like it almost adds a little bit of a timer element to the game. And because of the rules, the way we set up wandering monsters, they appear in the dungeon at the farthest away point from you. So like if you've only explored a couple rooms, we're going to place that wandering monster off in the area you've yet to explore, and it's going to begin moving towards your party, and it moves as if all of the thresholds, the unresolved thresholds in the dungeon, are open doors. So it's not hindered by doors. It doesn't have to open them or bash through them. It just continues to slowly move towards the party. And it does. It adds kind of it makes you want to be a little quieter, and it also makes you not want to dilly-dally.
Yeah. Now, before you got all the balancing right, what kind of issues were you running into with the Underlands?
Well, what it was at first, it was like nobody really had a turn order. Everybody could kind of do what they wanted, wander around, and it was not structured enough. In a dungeon, it needs to feel more chess-like. It needs to feel more like if your party is completely out of position, you have to pay a price for that disorganization. And so it was kind of willy-nilly, and then we tried to add a new mechanic to it called an Underland lead. It's basically like a party leader, and that person would go up front and resolve all of the thresholds, reveal all of the cards in each room, and basically kind of take all of the fun out of it. Everybody else is just kind of behind watching this person lead the way, and it didn't work. It didn't. I mean, because in our little cavern adventure with 5 rooms, the mage she had something on her that if you hit her, you took a bunch of damage. So she had like a thorns type effect on her body, and so she wanted to go traipsing off and opening doors and stuff. And that's really the way it should be. You know what I mean? That everybody in the party should get a chance to have some fun. And so, let's see, what else did we have that was a problem? The last thing that we had to fix was that before, when you would go to the threshold to resolve a door, that's where your movement had to end. And because of that, it just created like a wasted turn. It's like, well, why? You know what I mean? If you go up to a door and it's closed, but not locked, well, then you should be able to walk in and at least into the room, that next space, so that you can then begin to look at what's in the room, resolve the cards, generate the threat, roll the threat dice, and resolve those. And that was the last thing that we fixed this weekend. Was that door kind of becoming a wasted turn. And so now, if you've got movement left, you go to the door, it costs you a movement point to open it, and then step through the door. And then that's where your turn can end. So in other words, you're not wasting a turn. You're not just you're not just ending your turn there and waiting till the next turn to step in the room. Now you can step right in. Well, if you don't have enough movement left to do that, you can move through friendlies. So like if you're out of movement at the threshold, one of the other your party mates can actually step through you into the room to begin that process of finding out what's in the room. And there's no more wasted turn. So it really made it much more fast and fluid.
Mm-hmm. And that helps keep from breaking immersion too, because it's kind of weird in a story sense if you just kind of stand at the door and wait.
Oh yeah.
Now, outside of the Underlands, were there any other things that you needed to address in playtesting?
What else did we address? We'd been working on flyers, and I'm happy with the way that works now. Flyers have two positions. They have flight height, and then they have fight height. Once during their turn, a flyer can move from flight to fight height or fight to flight height, and it's free. It doesn't cost them an action to do it, but they can only do it once per turn. And so if they are flying above melee range where no one can get to them except for people with ranged weapons, then they can choose to come down to fight height to attack. But once they've done that and used that as a free action, they can't just come down, attack, and then go back up. So they're not invulnerable. And we tested that and tested it to make sure that it was airtight, that we liked the way it played, and it does. It plays well. We have these little plastic stands that elevate flyers. So if it goes from fight height, which is basically ground level, up to above melee, you just use this little stand and you put it on, and then it shows the miniature in the battlefield raised up above everybody else. So it's very handy.
Yeah, that makes sense. That just makes it so much easier to kind of know what's going on by just looking.
We fixed the thieves cards. We wanted one of the things that I don't like to do in any game series, but especially one I'm designing, is if something has a benefit, I don't want the benefit to be isolated to one instance. Like we have this item called a slumber spruce cone. So you basically, if you have a campfire lit when you're resting, when you're camping, if you put this slumber spruce cone into the fire, it allows everybody's sleep to be restful. So some of the cards say restless sleep because you're having nightmares from all the stuff that you're facing. But these cones, you throw them in and it allows people to sleep soundly. But then the fire really didn't have a whole lot of benefit other than just allowing you to use that item. And so we changed the thieves cards to say that if you actually light a fire for your camp, it reduces the risk of thieves. So like if everybody's sleeping and nobody's on watch, then you have a 50% chance, if you draw a thieves card, of losing an item in your inventory, which stinks. Okay. But if you have an actual fire lit, thieves are less likely to wander into the firelight and risk being seen to take your items. And so if you have a fire lit, not only can you put slumber spruce cones into the fire now to help you rest better, but it also reduces the risk of thieves down to a 1 in 6 chance instead of a 50-50 chance. So it greatly reduces thieves risking their lives to come into the firelight to take your items. And we thought that was a really cool mechanism without adding a lot of complexity to the game. It made lighting an actual fire worth the effort.
Yeah, and that's interesting because People hate losing stuff. It's one of those things that you have to be aware of when you're designing games, or really if you just are doing marketing like me. Loss aversion is a big motivator. So having something that allows people to reduce their odds of getting an item stolen will feel really good in terms of balancing, even though you're doing very little to change the game.
Yep. The other thing we did um, in playtesting was I because this is a seasoned group of gamers that we're working with, and they like a lot of the same games I do. Like Jess is a big Diablo fan; she loves Diablo, and she's she's in the beta right now. And she was going to go home after after the day of playtesting and go play on the Diablo 4 beta. But they play Gloomhaven. They play a lot of big, heavy things. And so this is the kind of group to say, okay, what's missing? If we're taking a last pass over the game, they love the skills, they love the items, but what are we missing? And so we began to have a discussion, not only here up in the bunker room, but also when we went to dinner. We continued to talk about what was missing, what things that they thought would enhance play. And one of the things that Joe said was he felt like the Rook, who is kind of our martial artist, he probably shouldn't start out his career with a staff because he's a monk type character. And so we decided to create some hand wraps, basically to allow the monk to start out with hand wraps that give him a little bit of a plus with his fists. Because when you don't have any weapons in Vrahode, you can attack twice in your turn. As long as you're not doing anything else, you can attack twice with your fists, just like we let you also dual wield small weapons. Or we let you shoot 2 times from your bow if you're shooting at distance. And so we decided we were going to take away the staff from Rukus, the Rook, which is our monk, and we're going to give him hand wraps. And so we introduced hand wraps to the game, not just regular hand wraps, but as a treasured item in, I think, expansion 1, we have a magic item that is, they're called jagged hand wraps, and they're crystal infused hand wraps. So there's a bunch of jagged crystals on the knuckles of these hand wraps, and they add +2 to your weaponless attacks and a bleed effect. And so we set out to kind of design a line of hand wraps that fit that monk function in the game. So we've got studded hand wraps are your first upgrade. You can go up from there to a treasured item called chain hand wraps. And those are metal and leather, but they have chains across the knuckles. And those give you +2 to your hand attacks. We introduced caltrops, which are just little pointy, they look like jacks. When you play it, when you're a kid, that you play with a ball of jacks. Caltrops look like jacks, but they're pointy on the end. You can throw those into an area to as a trap almost. We introduced smoke bombs into the game, which are just little clay jars that you light. You have to have a fire starter kit or a special kind of ring to be able to ignite them. And then they basically fill an area with smoke that prevents ranged attacks out of, into, or through. We introduced another variably consumable item called Kurumaken, which is like a shuriken throwing star. It's an Asian weapon. And the way these work is you find a stack of these, and you can throw up to 2 of these stars per round. And as long as you don't roll a -3, you can continue to throw these every round up to 2. As soon as you roll a -3, the stack is gone and you discard the card. So it's a nice little variably consumable item that lets you attack twice in a round at range. And then the other thing about the Kurumaken that are unique is that they are unrecoverable. So like if you throw a hand axe, well, you can go recover that if you move to where it was thrown. But much like arrows, once you fire them, they're unrecoverable. The difference with the Kurumaken and arrows is that we give you infinite arrows for your bow, But the Kuramaken they come in a stack. You find a stack of them and you just continue to throw them until you roll a -3 and then you discard them. So a really cool little unique item. We've got a jaw trap. That's just a single square trap, mainly for the Underlands. You could use it in the Overlands, but it's a 1x1 trap. And it's literally made from the jaw of some large beast. So we've got the jaw trap. We introduced a new regional item to the game. It's called Simplocarpus, and that is it's an aggro plant. The way that plant works is you find them in marshes, and they're stinky. And if you wipe that on your clothing and your armor, enemies within a certain range will attack you. It's an irritating, stinky smell. They're going to come after you for like 2 turns. And so it's a great way for warriors who want to keep enemies away from their healers and their casters. They can rub this Simplocarpus on them, and then everything's going to try to attack them. We've got a brand new whip now that can be dual wielded. It doesn't do hardly any damage, but it allows you to pull enemies to you from 3 spaces away. And so you can draw them in, and because you can dual wield with it, you draw them in and then smack them with your short sword or with your hand axe or whatever. It's the biggest benefit of a whip is that it's a pull item. If you had a pit in the ground, you could smack someone with the whip and pull them into the pit, and then the damage from the pit would be basically what you're trying to do to them is pull them. Got a new ring of flames that allows you to light campfires. You can light a torch with it and a lantern, and then if you on a plus roll with the ring of flames, it will actually imbue a weapon with a burn effect for the duration of an encounter or a battle. But you have to get a successful roll. It's not guaranteed that your weapon will have a burn effect, but if you get lucky and you roll a plus number, then that battle, your weapon will actually have a burn effect. So that's kind of a cool ring. We have a ring of water walking that allows you to treat all deep water as if it were just normal flat land. And so, river crossings are a whole different animal then, or coastal areas where you can get out and move around in the deep water without a movement penalty. Very powerful ring. We have a new marksman's bicocket. And if you don't know what a bicocket is, a bicocket is the type of hat that Robin Hood wore. So it's a long, narrow hat with a pointy front and a feather, most commonly. And this magic item allows a hero with a bow to get 2 more range out of that bow. And so that's really important because, obviously if you're a ranged attacker, the farther away you can accurately hit those enemies, the better for you. And then finally, we have the Explorer's Redound. And the Explorer's Redound is a bladed boomerang. It can be used once a turn. You throw it. It's not designed to cut deeply. It's designed to graze the enemy and cause a bleed effect and come back. So it does almost no base damage because we're not trying to stick it into them. We're just trying to graze across their skin and get some blood flowing so that they bleed out. And so the Explorer's Redound is another new item in the series.
These are going to be all really fun to play with on the table. And honestly, I can't wait to do the TTS demo. Like, I need to do that as soon as possible. But they're all going to play. These all sound awesome.
Yeah,
like really, just immersive, the kind of stuff that you would expect in a world like Vrahode.
Yeah, no, it adds a whole new element when you can drop down traps. When you can drop down some caltrips or set a jaw trap, or in a hallway, throw a smoke bomb and block the hall. Yes, very simple, very strategic. None of the stuff in the game is hard to understand or implement. We don't use complex iconography. We use plain language and plain math that you can understand without having to look in a rule book. And so this stuff just gets you, it grabs you, it pulls you in, and it does not let you go because there's so many fun and consequential things happening around you quickly. And that's the thing. Everybody that's ever play tested this game or played at convention, that's the thing they all rave about is this thing is quick and easy. And even though you had to explain some things to me, I was ready to play in 5-10 minutes. And that's really where we are with Vrahode. It's I don't know. It's
Your playtesting consensus has been very good. I mean, like, objectively very good. Even if you don't have a stake in it, like, the only real obstacle left at this point, which I don't think is going to be a huge problem for you either, is just blind playtesting. And like, once you get the rule guide ready for people to look at and play on their own, and the quest book, same thing. It's just going to be a couple of months of just changing up the wording so that people are able to follow things without your input, and it's like, you've got it.
yeah. No, we're approaching that. Yeah, I think we're getting real close.
Yeah. So on that note, I actually think we're at time on this episode, but there are a few questions I want to ask you in the next one. I was going to ask you about what you're doing to prep for KublaCon and Origins. Until then, do you want to take us out?
Sure. Thank you for listening to the Vrahode Tavern podcast. If you enjoyed this show, take a moment to subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps more than you know. You can learn more about Vrahode on vrahode.com. That's VRAHODE.com. Link in the show notes. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where we are at Vrahode. Thank you again for listening. We really appreciate it. Keep an eye out for our next episode in 2 weeks.